There's a certain kind of person who never stops talking, even when they're completely alone. They're in the shower, or lying in bed at 2 a.m., or walking back to their car after a meeting, and they're in the middle of a conversation. Not a new one, an old one, a conversation that already happened, or one that never will. They're not daydreaming, they're rehearsing, and most of them have been doing it so long they don't remember life without it. Most people call this overthinking and move on. That label is wrong. Overthinking analyzes a problem that already exists. What these people do is something stranger. They generate problems that haven't happened yet, then practice surviving them. There's one specific sign of this that nobody recognizes as a symptom, and I'll come back to it. First, the 5 traps you fall into when your mind starts rehearsing and can't stop. Trap 1. The redo. You won an argument 3 years ago. Maybe it ended badly, maybe it ended well, but your mind keeps returning to it, rewriting what you said. You're in the shower, and suddenly you're back in that conversation, but this time you're sharper. You deliver the line that would have won. You see their face when it lands. For a second, you feel something like satisfaction, and then you notice you're alone, and the water has gone cold. Psychologists call this counterfactual thinking, running alternate versions of past events. For most people, it's a brief flash. For you, it's the default channel your brain returns to when it's idle. You weren't taught to process conflict by talking it through in the room. You were taught to process it alone, later, silently. So your mind keeps trying to finish what never got to finish. That's what you do with the past. Here's what you do with the future. Trap 2. The rehearsal. A difficult conversation is coming next week. A confrontation with your boss. A boundary with a parent. A text you still haven't sent. Your mind begins rehearsing it from every angle. You anticipate their response. You rehearse yours. You run the whole scene end to end, sometimes 6 or 7 variations, sometimes more. And then, often, you never have the conversation at all. The rehearsal becomes the event. You feel like you already had it. You're exhausted like you did. But nothing in the real world has changed. Your nervous system worked a full shift for nothing. This isn't preparation. Preparation leads to action. What you're doing is something different. You're using the simulation to avoid the real thing, because the simulation is the only version where you feel in control. That's the conversation you're still planning to have. Here's the one you can't have anymore. Trap 3. The ghost conversation. Someone is no longer in your life. A parent, an ex, a friend who stopped calling. You haven't spoken in months or years, and your mind still talks to them every day. You imagine telling them what you've become. You imagine the apology they'd give. You imagine what they'd say about the person you're dating now. Sometimes you imagine them missing you. Sometimes you imagine winning. Stephen Porges describes the body's threat scanning system as always active beneath awareness. He calls it neuroception, looking for familiar patterns. For you, that system is still connected to someone who isn't there. Your nervous system hasn't finished the relationship, so your brain keeps one open on its behalf. You're not talking to them, you're regulating yourself by talking toward them. That's about them. This next one is just about you, and it's the one that costs the most. Trap 4. The confession. You compose explanations for things no one asked about. You rehearse justifications for choices nobody is questioning. You draft long, careful responses to imagined accusations, sometimes from strangers, sometimes from people who don't even know the situation exists. If you grew up in a house where you had to explain yourself constantly, your nervous system never filed, "I don't owe anyone an explanation," as a safe option. So you pre-defend. You build the case before the accusation arrives. You carry a courtroom inside you where you're always the defendant, and the trial never ends, because the verdict you actually want, that you're not a bad person, isn't one you can issue to yourself. Gabor Maté writes about children in unpredictable environments who learn to preempt blame, scanning for what they might be accused of next, and preparing the defense in advance. Most of them grow up to become adults who can't have a quiet mind. There's always another imaginary trial pending. And here's the part I said I'd come back to. The final trap doesn't feel like a trap at all. It feels like how you think. Trap 5. The second self. You narrate your own life as it happens. You're walking down the street and you're describing what you see in your head, not in the be here now way meditation teachers talk about, but as if you're telling someone. You're eating dinner alone, and you're mentally framing how you'd describe the meal to a friend who isn't asking. You're mid-argument with your partner, and half of you is already composing the text you'll send to someone else later, explaining your side. There's a name for this experience in psychology. Metacognition is the ability to think about your own thinking. Most people have it and can turn it off. For you, the observer never turns off. A version of yourself is always running parallel commentary, because somewhere in your past, being truly present with yourself wasn't safe. The observer is what kept you okay. It still is. And it's exhausting in a way nothing else can fix, because you can't rest from yourself. Your brain isn't broken. It's prepared. Every trap is the same mechanism pointing at a different target. A nervous system that learned early you had to anticipate conversations to survive them. You weren't taught to trust the present. You were trained to rehearse it. So what do you do with this? Not stop. You can't. And trying makes it worse. 3 things instead: small and quiet. First, name the original conversation. When you catch yourself mid-rehearsal, name whose voice you're actually answering. I'm rewriting the fight with my father. The loop can't keep running once it's been named. Second, let the conversation finish somewhere real. If your body keeps returning to the same imagined scene, it's because something in you is trying to close it. Sometimes that's the conversation itself, finally. Sometimes it's a letter you write and don't send. Either way, the loop wants to end somewhere the body can feel. Third, and this is the one that changes things, let the observer rest. You don't have to narrate your life as you live it. You can eat a meal without describing it to someone who isn't there. You can walk to your car without composing the text you'll send later. You can have a quiet thought that doesn't have to become anything. The observer built a lifetime of vigilance that kept you safe. It's been on shift since you were small. Thank it. And then, 5 seconds at a time, let it go quiet. The silence won't feel empty forever. Eventually, it feels like rest. Your inner monologue isn't the problem. It's the receipt. Proof that someone, somewhere, made you believe you had to have the answer before the question was even asked. You're not overthinking. You're finishing conversations that never got to finish. You're pre-living futures because the past never let you be surprised. You're explaining yourself to an audience of ghosts because someone real used to demand it. You are not alone in this. There's a whole quiet room of people doing exactly what you're doing right now, narrating themselves as they read these words. Put the pen down. The case is closed. The jury has already left. Which trap were you doing? Literally. In the shower or the car yesterday? Tell me below. Subscribe to Psychology Gently. We translate what your body already knows into language your mind can finally use.